something we kind of end the year with versus start the year with, obviously. That wouldn't make much sense. So, and then we looked at the Four Freedoms speech by Roosevelt. This is the State of the Union address in 1941. And this is the document that it's important to know that, remember, we talked about how Roosevelt's basically hinting at the fact that we're going to go to war, and discusses the fact that the world needs to be able, the people in the world need to be able to have the basic rights that they, many people, you could say, take for granted in a democratic society that he's talking about. But I think it's interesting to point out that, that the freedom, there's a couple of them, like the last two, the freedom from want and the freedom from fear, are really important ones to look at. And I always find that speech to be very, very interesting. So let's take a look at the last one here. Ronald Reagan was an actor before he was president. And because of that, he had this natural ability to speak in front of people. And he had this natural ability to, really connect with people. And the biggest thing that is important to understand about this speech is that he gives this speech in front of a nationally televised audience. So obviously by that time, TV is everywhere by all means in the 1980s. And he has this ability to reach millions of people through that by also being someone who has this natural ability to speak in front of people. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the Ronald Reagan Challenger speech from 1986. And I'm going to read the introduction because it's kind of hard to see. It says, on the morning of January 28, 1986, millions of Americans were watching the space shuttle Challenger as Challenger was launched. Then 73 seconds later, after takeoff, people watched in horror as the space shuttle exploded and crashed into the ocean. All 7 crew members died. That night, President Reagan addressed the nation. His speech is a classic example of how a president serves as the emotional leader of a country. And obviously, in a time of turmoil, the president is the one that people look to first when there is a crisis. Okay, so we're going to look at this, and I'm going to have some people that want to read on this. Does anybody want to read that first part, please, right under the introduction? Sinead, go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union, but the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people in our country. This is truly a national loss.
Keep going, please.
19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe. We mourn their loss as a nation together.
Okay, thank you. It is important to note that when he's referencing the 19 years ago, that was the explosion where there was a fire on the launching pad, and that was the one that killed Gus Grissom, who is from nearby Lawrence County, probably the most famous astronaut from Indiana. There's a memorial for him in Mitchell, Indiana, which was near his hometown. But that was the disaster that killed Gus Grissom. So it's a pretty well-known story in history. Thank you, Sinead. Can I get a new reader, please, where it says for the families of the 7? Alex.
For the families of the 7, we cannot bear, as you do, the full impact of this tragedy. But we feel the loss, and we're thinking about you so very much. Your loved ones were daring and brave, and they had that special grace, that special spirit that says, "Give me a challenge, and I'll meet it with joy." They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover its truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us. We've grown used to the wonders of this century. It's hard to dazzle us, but and it's not loading. Hold on. There we go. But for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun.
Keep going, please. Keep
We're
going.
still
Yep.
pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it is hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future and will continue to follow them.
Okay, thank
I've
you very
always had-
much. I'm going to stop you there for just a second. I want to point out this is, this is the part that always gets me, because this was a significant moment, because you did have people aboard Challenger who were civilians that were going into space. And it was a big moment that was shown on TV. My cousin, who's several years older than me, remembers watching this live on TV as a 10-year-old and remembering not kind of understanding how to respond to it, because this is, I mean, can you imagine as a school children, as a student watching this live on TV? I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, the only thing I could think of that would compare to it is if you were watching one of the towers get hit by the planes during the 9/11 attacks, which I know in some cases was happening across the country. But imagine being the president and having to relay some kind of comforting message to students and children, many of which are still kind of trying to process this whole circumstance. It's truly unbelievable how that would be difficult. Can I get another reader to kind of finish it out for us? Alex, thank you very much for reading. Eileen, go ahead. We left off with, "I've always had great faith."
I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happened today does nothing to diminish it. We don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all up front and in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space. Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journeys continue. I want to add that I wish I could talk to every man and woman who works for NASA or who worked on this mission and tell them, your dedication and professionalism have moved and impressed us for decades, and we know of your anguish. We share it. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and a historian later said, he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was, like Drake's, complete. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us by the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
Okay, thank you very much. So what we tried to do with these speeches is to give you a sense of why these presidents and their moment made comments to an audience that are considered to be revered. Whether it was Washington as the first president setting the tone for his successors, or whether it was Lincoln trying to patch the nation together during a time of great crisis and divide, if it was Roosevelt kind of hinting at the fact that there's this global threat that inevitably will bring us into it. And I keep thinking about how it's so interesting that with Roosevelt's speech, that's January of 1941, and by the end of the year, we're involved in the war, but why we weren't officially in before that, I find that very interesting. And then lastly, Reagan comforting the nation during a crisis that was visible on TV in front of millions of people and having to be the emotional, stable leader at that time, and how his tremendous speaking ability, he was called the great communicator for a reason, aided in that, and how not every president could have handled that circumstance that way. Okay. So what I would like you to do now, please, is go back to the home page, and right there for number 2, we see the presidential qualities speech assignment, and I'd like you to put that into Notability. And it's very important, ladies and gentlemen, that you put this into Notability now so that you can reference it later during the course of this assignment. Okay, if you don't, then you're going to have trouble locating it down the road. So please make sure that you put this assignment into Notability, okay? So I'm going to give you a moment to do that, and then we're going to talk about the assignment itself. And again, this is one of my favorite assignments during the year because it does give you all a lot of flexibility of what you're going to be researching to a certain extent, okay? And we'll talk about that. Okay, now before anybody has any questions about the assignment, let me go through this and make sure that you are aware of what's going on. And if there is something that needs clarification, I would be happy to provide this for you, okay? So you're going to be writing a 5-paragraph speech. So that's an introductory paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. There's your 5. Arguing for 3 qualities that make a president great. So, and you're going to be including examples describing at least 3 presidents that demonstrate the qualities that you choose, okay? And so it's please make sure you're listening in on this, because this is very important, because if you don't hear me about this and make sure you understand my clarification, you're going to go about this incorrectly. So you're going to think of 3 characteristics or 3 qualities that you feel every great president embodies. Okay, so you have like characteristic or quality number 1, quality 2, and quality 3. For each of those qualities, you need to be able to cite and explain in detail how and why, or really how, that presidential example embodied that quality. So let's say you have quality A. You find a president that you feel embodies quality A, and you explain in detail why. You have quality B. You find another example, a different example, obviously, of another president that embodies quality B and why. And then you have quality C, and you are finding a third example of a president that embodies that quality. If you have a question, just hold on one second, because I may answer it, okay? You can keep your hand raised. Yeah, that's fine. But I may get to that in just a second. So at the very minimum, I only want you to find 3 qualities. 3 qualities that you feel, or characteristics that you feel, embody a great president. At the very minimum, you need to have at least 1 example of a president per quality. So when I think of an example, you could say, okay, Thomas Jefferson, or John Adams, or John F. Kennedy, or Franklin Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, whoever, they embody this characteristic because during their presidency, they did this, and you go into detail and explain why, okay? Now, we just talked about 4 different presidents in 4 different circumstances displaying, you could argue, 4 qualities. We had George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, and Ronald Reagan. What I don't want you to do, and this is very important, so listen very carefully, is I don't want you to be referencing 3 of those 4 presidents and their qualities and citing those specific speeches, because other words, all you're going to be doing is regurgitating information we've already covered. This is going to require you to think of 3 qualities and at least 3 presidents by doing your research on your own. So this is going to require a little bit of work in finding, okay, I need to think about what are qualities that I believe every president should possess, and then seeking out presidents that display those qualities. Okay, Sinead, go ahead with your question unless I answered it.
So for like the different qualities, can we cite the same president if it's like a different speech or a different example? Is it okay if it's the same
Sure.
president if it's a different example?
Sure. So, I mean, honestly, I will tell you this. I've had nearly every president cited in this assignment, meaning over the course of the years, and I've done this for several years, I've had nearly every president, but besides a few obscure ones like William Henry Harrison, who only served for a month, and maybe somebody like, oh, I don't know, Millard Fillmore or Andrew Johnson. I've nearly had every other president cited. And I've really challenged people to not just gravitate towards the same easy presidents, because I mean, in reality, the presidents that most people are going to gravitate to here are Washington, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. Okay. So I'm not saying that you can, again, like Sinead asked, can we use a presidential example of one of those if it's not based on like Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address? You can. But again, I would challenge you to make sure that you diversify a little bit. Okay. I've had people that have said Abraham Lincoln, Chester A. Arthur, and Jimmy Carter. I've had one year I had John Quincy Adams, John Tyler, and Ulysses S. Grant. That's pretty unique. So again, branch out a little bit, because I have provided you with very good resources for this, which I'm going to get to in just a second. Your steps for completion. I realize that a checklist isn't for everybody, but for a lot of people, this is the best way to make sure that you have fulfilled the assignment and that you have checked every step off the list. So step one, you need to identify your qualities. If you're not sure of what the qualities are, I wouldn't suggest starting to look at presidents. Okay? Figure out what are the qualities that I think are important that would make a president great. Once you have those qualities, begin conducting your research with the resources provided below, which I will talk about in just a second, to find 3 presidents who embody those qualities. Embodying mean they possess those qualities during their presidency at some point, or they possess those qualities in general. All right. Number 3, construct your speech to include an introductory paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Now, this is not a traditional speech or a traditional writing assignment by any means, but you still need to structure it as, I'm trying to persuade my audience that I'm correct. And in doing so, you still have to have an effective introduction that has that hook, more or less, that you know about from writing, that's going to draw in your audience to start listening to your speech. Okay? So that's important. It still needs to be a 5-paragraph document. That does not change. Okay? Number 4, an MLA formatted bibliography with the resources that you use for your speech. So you may have forgotten, but way back when, at the beginning of the year, we did a national parks project. And one of the things that I discovered over and over again was that in the bibliography, we were just listing URLs like below. That's not an MLA formatted bibliography. That's a URL, a link to the website. Okay, so by now, and understanding how this process works, you need to be using bibliography generators that are out there like EasyBib to create an MLA formatted bibliography. And one of the things that I have to stress is the fact that when you are, and this is one of the resources, by the way, this is the best resource that you have there. This is the Miller Center at the University of Virginia that has a very detailed background on every single US president, okay? So if I choose, let's say, Martin Van Buren, notice that the URL changes. And every subsequent page that I choose is going to change the name of the web page. Okay? So what you need to understand is that when you are doing your research, you cannot just use the initial website that I provided for you. You cannot use the Miller Center website or the one on the presidents. You cannot use that as your website for everything, because this specific page is not where you got the information. You got it from a different source within that. So I need you to understand why that's important, because otherwise you're going to do your bibliography incorrectly. And again, by this point, to me, you should be creating an MLA formatted bibliography. Okay. Number 5, review your speech for grammatical errors. This is one that's overlooked a lot because we get toward the end of the project, we're running out of time, we have to submit it, and we don't take the time to review grammar. Okay. A couple things. The names of the presidents should always be capitalized. If you're referring specifically to President Washington, President Jefferson, President, Kennedy, the word president is capitalized because it's a title and you're referencing someone specifically. That's a proper noun. Okay? Sinead.
Will we have to present the speeches?
I'm going to get to that in just a second. So that one, again, if I stumble across a speech that is full of grammatical errors, I'm going to send it back and say, this is not ready because it's going to take me a long time to just be highlighting grammatical errors that need to be addressed before you submit it. So that's one that you really need to pay attention of because a lot of times this is overlooked. Okay. The last thing you will do, you will be submitting it when it's done as a finished PDF to this turn-in, which is not yet activated because it's not submitted yet. But that's what you're going to be looking for. This is why this document needs to be a notability and needs to be referenced every day that you're working on this assignment. The speech itself is going to be due at the beginning of our session on Wednesday, December 2nd. Okay, that's 2 weeks from tomorrow. Now, that may seem like a way off in the distance, but again, next week's Thanksgiving break, and I'm not asking people to devote their entire break to working on this project. That's completely up to you, but obviously you want to enjoy your break as much as I do. So with that said, I'm still providing you with ample amount of time, even in our live session, to be conducting research and prepping for this assignment's completion. Okay. Your resources here, I cannot stress this enough. This is why they are here. These are all reliable resources, especially this first one. The bulk of the information that you're going to find is really going to come from the Miller Center. It's a very, very, very reputable website. So please do not use Wikipedia. You're not having to find images. I do not want Wikipedia to be used. I'm not going to debate about that. I'm just telling you, I provided you the resources right here. I would ask that you use them. Okay. Let's go to the rubric. Okay. In years past, when we're in a normal school setting, we would be presenting these in class. Okay. I did not have time to reformat the entire rubric. So what I've done is I've focused with the highlighted text, the point values for the areas that we're going to be highlighted for this assignment. The bulk of this is the writing itself and the background information, obviously. 16 points. 2 points for grammar and spelling, 2 points for bibliography. But I caution you, if you don't have a bibliography, you automatically, that's 2 points off, that's an A-, 18 out of 20. If you have a huge amount of spelling and grammar errors, that's 2 additional points. Excuse me. So that is already now a B-. Okay. So these two factors are not going to be taken into account. All right. Because it's just not going to work. And in our limited time that we have, it's just not going to be possible. I would like to, in a normal circumstance, have people give their speeches. I would love to, because I know a lot of people take pride in that. And I'm still going to be able to see your effort and your quality and all that through the actual assignment. Okay. But the rubric lays it out. Okay. Now, I want to go back up here because a lot of people ask this question. I want to make sure it's clear. I've had people in the past say, can I present a president that fully displays that quality and give the reasons why in the detail, and then one that doesn't? Yes, you can do that. But I caution you, because in several cases in the past, I've had a person who has presented an example of someone who does display that quality, but they're really focused on why this one person doesn't. And they kind of go off on this tangent. And I don't want that to be the reason why, I don't want that to be the focal point of the assignment. With that said, I need to know fully and clearly with detail why that president embodies that characteristic. Okay, an example of one that would be not enough is if you say Washington was a great leader because he showed leadership by leading us through the victory to the American Revolution, and that's it, that would not be enough. It would need to be a detailed explanation. And that's why, again, even though it says here you have to have at least one, you can go in and talk about more than one. Absolutely. Okay. Now, we are still going to be meeting at the beginning of each period tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. But I will have the live meeting set up after that for anyone who wants to pop on to ask any questions. And I'm going to go over a few things tomorrow if you didn't hear me clearly or something is still confusing. Okay. But before you question something, review the assignment, look at the steps for completion. It's all there, very neatly laid out. What you need to be doing right now is thinking to yourself, and this is your exit ticket for today, and you don't need to have this done right this minute, but I'd like you to have it done by the end of the day. What 3 qualities are you considering to focus on for the speech assignment? Okay, that's what the exit ticket shows. Okay, so that's what's going to be expected for that. Yes, Cassidy, what's up?
Sorry, my mic was being weird. Could you, for one quality, say you don't have, could you like split it into 2 paragraphs if there's more that
Sure.
you want to say?
Yeah, you're not limited to having it being exactly 5. 5 is just the minimum. I have some people that, yes, I can definitely tell you, and especially talking to students in person, that want to go further than that. Absolutely. But at the minimum, it's a 5-paragraph, 3-body paragraph speech. So
Is there a maximum limit?
there's not, but just keep in mind the due date for the assignment. That's what I would tell you. Okay. All right. We're about out of time. Please understand that we are meeting tomorrow. If there's any questions that you have about the assignment, please make sure you read over it. I did record this session so that you could go back and review any of the comments that I made when we went over the assignment. And